I was 70 years old, and all my life I believed in one rule: if you don't owe, you don't fear. I never touched a credit card. Cash was my safety. I kept every receipt in a wooden box by my bed, and my little notebook always balanced down to the last cent. But that morning when I bent down to open the rusted mailbox at the end of my driveway, my hands froze. Inside was a thick envelope with the bank's logo stamped in blue. I tore it open on the porch, sunlight cutting across the paper. The words screamed at me in red: "Past due $50,000. My voice cracked in the empty yard. 50,000. How can that be? I never had a credit card in my life. The paper shook between my fingers. For a moment I thought my heart had stopped. I didn't know then that this was only the beginning, that a secret inside my own house had already dragged my name into debt betrayal and a hearing that would make strangers gasp out loud. If you think silence and trust can always protect you, stay with me. Like this story, share it and subscribe, because what happened next could happen to any family. I have always lived by numbers, small numbers, careful numbers. A dollar saved a coupon, clipped a receipt tucked into the wooden box I kept beside my bed. Every morning I counted the bills in my wallet, wrote down what I spent the day before, and balanced it against the little notebook I've carried for decades. That routine is as much a part of me as the lines in my hands. People sometimes laughed. Old Man Harris, they'd say, at the grocery store, still paying cash like it's 1950. I would smile and shrug, let them laugh. At least I knew where every cent went. At least I never owed anyone anything. Debt was a chain, and I watched too many neighbors wear that chain like it was jewelry. The morning the envelope arrived, the sky was blue. I walked to the rusty mailbox at the end of the driveway and felt the heat of the metal on my fingers. Inside sat a thick envelope with the bank's logo stamped in a navy square. I tore it open on the porch. Sunlight sliced across the paper like a blade. The words shouted in red: "Past due, $50,000. My breath folded in on itself. 50,000, I heard my own voice say, thin and strange. How can that be? I never had a credit card in my life. I carried the envelope inside. Daniel was on the couch scrolling, his phone legs spread. Melissa was at the stove. The smell of eggs and over-browned toast filled the room. "Bah, what's that?" Daniel asked without looking up. I set the envelope on the coffee table so hard the remote jumped. "They say I owe $50,000 on a credit card." Melissa's spoon stopped mid-scrape. Daniel took the stack of papers, flipped through them, and went pale. "Maybe it's a mistake, Bah. Banks mess up." "This is not a mistake," I said. "My name, my address, a list of places I don't go, jewelry stores, department stores, cash advances." I tapped the fine print. Interest piling month after month, late fees stacked on top of late fees. Melissa wiped her hands on a towel, smile too sweet. "Don't get worked up. We'll handle it. You don't need the stress." "I don't need lies," I said. She blinked. Daniel's thumb rubbed at the edge of the bill like he meant to erase the numbers. I walked to the small desk by the window. The wooden box sat where it always sits. I opened it and sifted through thin slips of proof groceries gas the barber once every 2 months. Every line of my life lay there in receipts, ordinary and clean. "I can prove what I spend," I said. "Every cent." Daniel set the papers down like they might explode. "Let me call the bank at lunch. I'll figure it out." "Why would they talk to you?" I asked. "We live here," he said too quick. "I can explain you're elderly." That I straightened up. "That I'm careful," I said, "not helpless." That evening I spread the statement on the kitchen table and read every line with the stubborn patience I have used on bolts that will not turn. The numbers told a story that was not mine. Weekend shopping sprees, cash pulled out of unfamiliar ATMs, interest, compounding penalties applied, then more interest feeding on the penalties. A hole dug with plastic shovels deep enough to swallow a man. The phone rang. I answered. A recorded voice crackled. "This is an important message regarding your account with First National Bank. Your balance is past due. To avoid additional fees and potential legal action, please make a payment today." "I don't have an account with you," I told the machine. "You're calling the wrong man." It didn't care. It repeated itself and hung up. A minute later, another number called. A human voice, now all syrup and thorns. "Mr. Harris, I can help you bring your account current. Can you verify your date of birth?" "No," I said, and set the phone down like it was hot. Melissa leaned in the doorway. "Who is that collectors?" I said. "They think I owe them." She shrugged. "Ignore it. They call everybody." I took my flip phone and called Emily. She answered on the third ring, breathless and bright the way she always sounds when she's finishing a shift. "Hey, Ba, everything okay, Emily?" I said. "I need you to look at something." My hands shook while I took the picture. I texted it. Through the line, I heard her gasp. 50,000, Ba. "What is this? I don't know," I said. "It came in the mail. My name, my address." Her voice sharpened like a blade pulled across a stone. "That's identity theft. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. Call the bank and demand a fraud investigation. I'm coming home this weekend." "You don't need to do that," I said. Your work can wait. You come first." When I hung up, Melissa was still in the doorway, arms crossed, dragging Emily into this. "She's busy." "It is my name," I said. "My life." She turned away, the towel twisted in her hands. Sleep did not visit that night. The ceiling fan murmured. The red numbers on the clock crawled. Somewhere down the hall, Daniel murmured into a phone, and Melissa's low reply slid under the door like smoke. I lay with my wooden box open beside me, running my fingers over the receipts like rosary beads. In the morning, Daniel stood in the kitchen with a tie he had not worn straight since high school. "I'll go to the bank at lunch," he said. "Let me explain this to them. Maybe they mailed the wrong statement." I looked at his eyes the way they flicked left and right like birds. "Why are you afraid to look at me?" I asked. He flinched. "I'm not. This is a lot." Melissa slid a mug of coffee toward me. "Drink, Dad. You're shaking." "I'm steady enough," I said, but I drank. I tried to do the things I always do. I clipped coupons. I walked to the store. The cashier asked about a rewards card, and I said no, as I always do. A man behind me paid with a tap of his phone and never looked at the number on the screen. "That's how they trap you," I muttered, and the cashier smiled politely like she hadn't heard anything at all. On the way home, Mrs. Turner waved from her porch. "Morning, Bill. You all right?" "Fine," I lied. The word tasted like a paper cut. Back in the living room, Daniel and Melissa spoke in the soft voices people use when they want you to know they are keeping a secret. They stopped when I came in. Daniel turned the TV volume up. Melissa organized the coasters that did not need organizing. "Did you talk to the bank?" I asked. Melissa answered too quickly. "Yes, they're looking into it. Takes time. Did they ask to speak to me?" "Not necessary," she said. And then, catching herself, added, "Yet." "Not necessary," I repeated. "My name is on the bill. My voice is on this phone. It is necessary." Daniel rubbed his temples. "Ba, please. We're trying." "Try harder," I said. That night, after they went to their room, I spread the statement again. I traced the list of ATMs with my finger. Most were across town near the big mall, the one I avoid because it smells like perfume and new money. The dates leaped out in a rhythm: Friday nights, Tuesday afternoons, Saturday mornings. A pattern, as if someone had set a private calendar and followed it like a religion. I folded the bill and slipped it into the breast pocket of my shirt. I slept that way, the paper against my heart, as if keeping it close would keep the debt from growing larger in the dark. On Sunday after church, Mr. Jensen clapped my shoulder in the parking lot. "Hang in there, Bill. Banks love to scare folks. Don't let 'em." "What have you heard?" I asked too quickly. He glanced at his wife. "Nothing solid, just that collections has been calling." "Sorry, friend." I kept my face still and my voice even. Rumors travel faster than truth. At home, I opened the wooden box and checked the receipts again, as if evidence could heal a wound. I thought of Emily when she was 10, standing in the kitchen, while Daniel shouted about a car he could not afford. "Ba is right," she said, hands on her narrow hips, fierce as a sparrow. "Debt just makes chains." She looked like her mother when she said it, and my heart hurt in the same place it hurts now. That memory warmed me until the phone rang again that evening. I let it go to voicemail, but the machine filled the kitchen with a voice: "Mr. Harris, a payment of $200 today will stop further late fees. Press 1 to authorize." I stood in the doorway and counted to 10 so I would not break the machine. I started checking the mail before Melissa could. Once I caught her already at the box, slipping a glossy envelope into her purse. She jumped when she saw me. "Just coupons," she said. "Let me see," I said. She laughed. "You and your coupons. It's the same flyers as always." I waited. She did not hand it over. I didn't push. I simply watched the purse disappear into the bedroom, and I made a mark in my notebook that meant something only I would understand. That week, Daniel came home late twice. I heard him in the driveway, his voice low. I know, he hissed. I know, and then, softer, I'm trying. When he came in, he smiled so hard it made his cheeks ache just looking at him. Long day, he said. You know how it is. I do. I said, I know what trying looks like and what lying feels like. He blinked. Bah, I raised a hand. You can tell me the truth now or later, but you will tell it. He swallowed and looked at the hallway. Melissa was there, a shadow behind the doorframe. He said nothing. On Thursday, I sat at the table with the statement and a map of the city torn from an old phone book. I circled the ATMs. A cluster by the mall, another near the big box stores, one by the freeway exit, where the pawn shop glows fluorescent green at night. If I were the sort of man who used a stolen name, I thought these are the places I would go. I felt ridiculous thinking like a detective at my age, but ridiculous is better than helpless. A new letter came the next day, thinner than the first. Final notice, it said. The number had grown by $40 in a week, late fee, interest on the interest, numbers breeding in the dark like mice. I dialed the bank myself. The menu tree tried to lose me, but I am patient. Eventually, a man came on the line and asked me for my name, my address, my date of birth. My name you already know, I said. I gave the address. I gave the birth date I have had for 70 years. And your social, he asked. No, I said. You tell me your name and your manager's number, and then you tell me when this account was opened and where. He hesitated. I can't disclose details without verification. I am disputing a debt that was planted in my name, I said. Open a fraud case. Send me the forms. Put on record that I deny this. Sir, he said, and I could hear him choosing each word. I'll notate the account. You should also contact the credit bureaus. We'll mail you a packet. Good, I said. Do it. When I hung up, Daniel leaned in the doorway. Bah, I told you I'd handle it. I handled what belongs to me, I said. My name. He rubbed his jaw. It's just, sometimes it's easier if I talk to people. You get upset. I get clear, I said. There's a difference. That night, the house felt like it belonged to someone else. Melissa laughed at something on her phone that didn't sound funny. Daniel washed a dish that wasn't dirty and set it in the rack with the care of a man disarming a bomb. I went to my room early and laid out the receipts like photographs of a missing person. After dark, I took the wooden box from beside the bed and set it on the table. I added the bill to the top. I added a page from my notebook where I had written every call, every lie, every odd look. I closed the lid gently as if I were putting a child to sleep. For 70 years, my books have balanced. Pennies and dollars, hours and days, debts and promises. Now the numbers in my life do not add up, and that means someone is changing them while I sleep. I don't know yet which hand holds the eraser, but I will find it. And when I do, I will write the truth so dark it bleeds through the paper. When I think of my life, it doesn't come in big fireworks, but in small, steady things, the tick of the kitchen clock, the rustle of coupons cut from the Sunday paper, the weight of the wooden box that holds decades of receipts. I can still see Anna's handwriting on the yellow note stuck to my fridge, property tax, March 15th. Under it is my pillbox, each square filled on Saturday night the way she taught me. My world is ordinary, but it is honest, and for 70 years I carried it like a promise. Anna used to say, Bill, your name is your inheritance. Protect it. More than houses or money, she believed what we leave behind is whether people can trust our word. I tried to live by that. Cash in the wallet, no debts, every grocery slip saved, every dollar written in the notebook beside the bed. If I couldn't pay, I didn't buy. Not complicated, just discipline. At the factory, I learned how debt turns men into ghosts. Joe from the loading dock once called credit cards free money. He bought a stereo and a Florida trip. A year later, the late fees ate, his paycheck collectors rang the plant, and the house went. He moved away, and no one laughed at free money anymore. Daniel arrived loud and hungry. As a boy, he wanted everything that flashed sneakers with air in the heels, a new game console, a shiny bike. Emily came 10 years later, quiet as snowfall, asking for library cards and notebooks, fire and water under the same roof. I will never forget the night Daniel demanded a car. 17 and pacing like a caged animal, he slammed his hands on the table. Everyone else drives bay. I can't show up to work smelling like the bus. How do I take a girl out? I can't keep walking like a loser. I folded my arms. We can't afford a car, Daniel, not without a loan, and I won't drag this family into debt. It's just a small loan, he shouted as if small made it harmless. Emily, 10 years old and fierce, stood on her chair so I would see her. Ba's right, she said, steady as a bell. Debt makes chains. Daniel spun on her. Stay out of it, Em. You don't get it. She didn't blink. I get that Ba works hard and loans make people cry. The word chains hung between us. I squeezed Emily's shoulder. Thank you, Con. Daniel stormed to his room, music rattling the frames. That night, Emily drew in her notebook and whispered, Don't let him make you feel bad. You're right. Her faith in me was a lantern in the dark. Then came the winter I lost Anna. A fast sickness took her like a thief. The morning after the funeral, I stood in the kitchen and heard only the refrigerator hum. No voice telling me to eat. No footsteps on the tile. Just me, Daniel and Emily, two children with eyes too wide. I didn't have answers, so I made a vow instead, keep us upright, keep her rule alive. Time stretched. Emily grew into herself, lists, calendars, a tidy apartment in another state. Every Sunday she would call. Ba, are you eating? Show me the pillbox. I'd hold it up, playing annoyed proud she cared. And don't let Daniel push you around, she'd add. Daniel wandered. College lasted a semester. Jobs came and went, the warehouse, the car wash, a sales gig that paid in promises. Then Melissa arrived, polished smile, clicking heels, eyes that scanned a room like price tags. I hoped she'd steady him. Instead, she sharpened his wants. I drove them to a furniture store once because their car wouldn't start and I had jumper cables. I thought we were just looking. Melissa ran her fingers along a glossy table built for 12. This shows who we are, she said like a commercial. You don't have the money, I told them. She smiled at me the way people smile at a slow child. That's what credit is for. Daniel followed her to the counter. After that, packages multiplied, brand logos I didn't recognize, boxes big enough to live in. On sale, they laughed. We got points. I kept clipping coupons, paying utilities in person, sliding exact cash across counters that had known my hands for decades. Money doesn't come from nowhere, I reminded myself. Silence was easier than argument. I told myself their choices couldn't touch me if my books stayed balanced. The neighborhood marched along with its small rhythms. Mrs. Turner watered geraniums at 8. A new neighbor, Sarah, moved in next door. She taught at the elementary school. Morning, Mr. Harris, she'd say when jogging by. Simple kindness, the kind that keeps a street breathing. One afternoon, I watched Melissa reach into my mailbox and slip 2 envelopes into her purse. She saw me. Coupons, she said, too fast. They send them to everyone. I nodded and kept walking, but something cold settled in my stomach and stayed. I stuck to my habits. On Wednesdays, I walked to the grocery store with a folded sheet of coupons. Rewards card, sir, the cashier would ask. No thank you, I'd say, laying down exact cash. A man behind me would tap his phone and be gone before the receipt printed. I kept Anna's note on the fridge even after I memorized the date. I liked seeing the swoop of her capital P. A magnet circled my next Medicare appointment, Tuesday, 9 a.m. Daniel and Melissa moved in just until rent settles down, and then 5 years slid by. Dinners were less lonely, I told myself. But I also watched Melissa rush to the mailbox, watched Daniel take calls on the porch with his voice low and tight. Some nights I heard them arguing through the wall. We can't keep paying minimums, Melissa hissed. It's just numbers, Daniel said, the way a drowning man says the ocean is just water. Once I found Daniel on the porch, shoulders hunched. Everything all right, I asked. He stared at the streetlight. Just thinking, he said, and went inside. A week before the envelope, Sarah caught me at the sidewalk. The mail carrier mentioned a lot of bank letters lately, she said, lowering her voice. I told him, you're careful. I smiled. Always have been. She hesitated. I've also seen Melissa fetch your mail when you're not out yet. Maybe that's nothing. Maybe not. Thanks for telling me, I said, and the cold feeling in my stomach grew a spine. Then the envelope came, a thick one with the bank's blue square. The red words. The 50,000. Daniel's face gone pale. Melissa's smile too sweet. That belongs to another part of the story, but the second I held it, the past stopped being memory and became motive. Collectors called within days, as if the envelope had rung a bell only wolves could hear. A recorded voice said, I owed them today, tomorrow worse. A woman with a syrupy tone asked me to confirm my date of birth for convenience. I hung up on all of them. My number belongs on slips of paper, not in their computers. When I told Emily, her voice changed shape. The brightness folded into steel. Bah, that's identity theft. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. Keep every letter. I always keep every letter, I said. Good, she answered. I'm coming home Friday. You don't need to do that. I lied. You have work. Work can wait. You come first. That night the house whispered. Through the wall, Melissa low and sharp. He's stubborn. We should have paid it down earlier. Daniel small and tired. I thought we had time. Make time, she said. Tell him he's confused. People will believe it. Chairs scraped. Footsteps crossed the hall. I lay in the dark with my hand on the wooden box like a life preserver. Memories crowded me to keep me from breaking. Anna catching young Daniel with $2 from her purse the way she held his wrist and said, "We don't lie about money in this house." He put the bills back crying, and she hugged him so he knew rules came from love. Joe's locker, the hockey schedule tacked above overdue notices. Lives bent by plastic. Pictures like soldiers reminding me a life is built from small, honest choices until someone decides to spend it like it belongs to them. On Thursday evening, I found Daniel on the porch again. "Walk with me," I said, and we went down the block like we used to when he was little. "Did you take anything from my mailbox?" I asked. "No," he said too quickly. "Have you used my name for anything?" He stared at the sidewalk. "No." A beat. "Melissa." She said it was a workaround, he blurted at last, then winced. "For cash flow, temporary, efficient." He laughed without humor. Her words. "What are yours?" I asked. He rubbed his face. "I don't know. You do," I said. "You're just afraid to say them." He didn't answer. We turned back toward the house like men walking into weather. Friday came gray and thin. I lined up my pillbox, swept the step, clipped the last coupon from the envelope of ads that comes whether you want it or not. At noon, Sarah waved. "You okay, Mr. Harris?" "I will be," I said. "My daughter's coming." "Good," she said. "You shouldn't have to carry this alone." The taxi pulled up a little after 5. Emily climbed out with a small suitcase and hugged me hard. "Bah, you've lost weight. You look like your mother when you're angry," I said. She laughed through wet eyes. Melissa materialized in the doorway, smile brittle. "Emily, long trip." "Not long enough to stop me from protecting my father." Emily answered. Daniel stood behind her, pale and quiet, hands in his pockets, like a boy who'd broken something and didn't know how to confess. That night we sat at the kitchen table, Anna once polished with lemon oil, and Emily laid out everything like a case. The bill, the windowed envelopes that show red numbers before you even open them, my notebook with dates and times of every call. She added a few sticky notes in her neat hand. She read the statements line by line, tilting her head the way she does when she's solving a problem. "Withdrawals on Fridays, shopping on Sundays. Whoever is doing this follows a routine." "Not mine," I said. "Exactly." She closed the folder and covered my hand. "Bah, listen to me." She waited until I met her eyes. "You didn't build this debt, and you won't carry it. We're going to pull on every thread until the whole lie comes apart." I looked at the wooden box, at the small mountains of paper I had saved to prove a careful life. For weeks those slips felt like lifeboats. Sitting with Emily, they felt like armor. Fear hardened into flint. Emily stood and started a pot of tea in Anna's blue-rimmed cup. "Tomorrow," she said, "we go to the bank. We ask for what's ours, whatever application they claim exists, the dates, any recording, any camera they have. We keep the word simple because the truth is simple, and we make a report, so there's a page of paper that says you said no." She smiled, small but fierce. "Simple steps." I nodded. "Simple is how I've lived." She slid my notebook back toward me. "Then write this down. Tuba, today is the day we stop being quiet." I wrote it letter by letter in the neat hand the plant taught me because one wrong mark can break a machine. Then I closed the notebook, turned off the kitchen light, and followed my daughter down the hall toward whatever came next. Saturday morning came gray and cold. Emily drove me to the bank, her folder tucked tight under her arm. Inside the lobby, everything gleamed: glass walls, polished counters, screens flashing numbers I didn't understand. To me, banks always smelled of polish and hidden traps. A young man in a tie introduced himself as Mason. He led us into a small cubicle. So he said, tapping his keyboard, "You're disputing an account." Emily spoke first. "My father never opened a credit card, yet he received a bill for $50,000. Mason nodded like he'd heard it before. "Let's verify. Name, William Harris," I said. "Date of birth, address." I gave them my voice steady. He scrolled. "Application 18 months ago, electronic signature. Card mailed to your address, activated by phone a week later." I felt my stomach drop. "Mailed here." "Yes, sir." Emily leaned forward. "We want the activation recording." Mason typed quickly. "We'll request it. Also, here's a fraud packet." Affidavit checklist, police report instructions. He slid papers across the desk. I signed where Emily pointed. My hand shook, but each stroke felt like striking a match. Mason handed us another sheet. Transaction history. The lines blurred together. Friday cash advances, Sunday department stores, gas stations, mall, withdrawals. At the bottom, $50, $1,000. Outside, the wind bit my face. Emily held the papers close. First step done. Next police report, credit freeze. Keep logging every call. My notebook is ready, I said. When we came home, Melissa was at the sink wiping the same dish 3 times. Daniel stood nearby, his hands in his pockets. How'd it go? He asked, voice thin. The bank is investigating, Emily said. They have an activation recording. We asked to hear it. Melissa forced a smile. Good. They'll sort it out. Does that usually happen? Emily asked to people who've never touched a credit card in 70 years. Melissa blinked. Banks make mistakes. I watched Daniel. He looked at the floor. That night the phone rang. A recorded voice. Mr. Harris, immediate payment required. Failure to comply will result in legal escalation. I hung up. Emily logged the call. Evidence, she said. By Sunday, the whispers had begun. At church, Mrs. Green touched my arm. Bill. I hope everything's all right. Folks say you've had trouble with the bank. My memory is fine, I said firmly. She flushed. Of course, people just talk, but the shame clung to me like smoke. That evening I heard Daniel and Melissa in the hall. We can't keep this up, Daniel whispered. Stay calm, Melissa said. He'll give up. He hates conflict. I stepped into the light. Wrong, I said. They froze. Daniel stammered, Bah, we were just lying. I finished. To each other, to me, but not for long. Melissa's eyes flashed. Without me, Daniel has nothing. Better nothing than stolen, I said. She turned on her heel, muttering. Daniel lingered, his face torn. The next day, Emily and I went to the police station. Officer Ramirez listened carefully, wrote down the details. Gave us a case number. With that, he said, the bank can release recordings and footage. Good, Emily said. Back home, Melissa cornered me in the kitchen. Do you realize what you're doing? You're turning your own family into criminals. I didn't turn anyone, I said. You did when you picked up a card with my name. Her face hardened. We needed help. You don't even use credit. It was sitting there wasted. Wasted, I hissed. My name is not wasted. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat at the table, receipts spread around me. Emily joined me, blanket over her shoulders. Boss, she whispered, we'll prove it. The next morning, Mason called. Mr. Harris, no authorized user cards are on record, just one account. Whoever said supplementary card was lying. I thanked him, my chest burning with clarity. At dinner, I asked straight, Melissa, did you open a card under my name? She stabbed her fork into the casserole. It's a supplementary card. Families do it all the time. Emily slammed her hand on the table. Supplementary means authorized. He never authorized you. Melissa's eyes narrowed. I admitted it. Isn't that enough? I'll pay it back. With what money? Emily shot back. From which job? Which bonus? Daniel rubbed his temples. Enough, please. I looked at him. Son, look me in the eye. He tried, but his gaze slid away. Melissa stood. Fine. Yes, I opened it, but I meant to pay it down. If I had, you'd never have known. What's the harm? The harm, I said, my voice steady, is you stole my name, and names don't belong to thieves. The silence that followed was heavier than stone. The house felt like a cage after that dinner. Doors closed harder. Footsteps lingered longer in the hallway. Melissa stopped pretending kindness. Daniel grew quieter, vanishing into long walks that never seemed to calm him. Emily and I stacked our evidence like bricks against a storm. A few days later, Mason called from the bank. Mr. Harris, we pulled the metadata on the account. The online application was filed from your home internet connection. I gripped the receiver. From this house, yes, sir, same address on the billing profile, but the IP trace links directly back to a device registered to your account here. Emily took the phone from me. So you're saying it wasn't an outside thief, it was someone in this house? There was a pause. That would be the logical conclusion. I thanked him and hung up my hand, shaking. The betrayal wasn't just suspicion, now it was nailed to my roof. That night I found Daniel sitting on the porch steps, head in his hands. Son, I said softly. He flinched but didn't look up. Bah, I don't know what to do. You know, I said, you're just afraid. His shoulders sagged. She said it was just a workaround, that no one would get hurt. She said, "You'd never even notice," and you believed her. He looked at me, then eyes wet. I wanted to. I wanted peace. I'm tired of fighting. Peace bought with lies isn't peace, I said. Before he could answer, Melissa opened the door. "Daniel," inside, her eyes cut to me sharp as glass. "This conversation's over," but I saw the flicker in Daniel's gaze, fear, shame, longing to speak. The next morning, Officer Ramirez called. "Mr. Harris, we've secured ATM stills. The woman withdrawing cash matches someone in your household." He didn't say the name, but I didn't need him to. That evening, I spread the photos on the table. Emily gasped, "It's her." Melissa froze in the doorway, then forced a laugh. "That could be anyone." "Anyone living under this roof," I said. Her voice snapped like a whip. "You think grainy pictures will prove anything? Banks want money, not gossip." Emily leaned forward. "And when they hear your voice on the activation recording, when they match your device ID, what then?" Melissa's face cracked. "You can't prove." "Don't finish that sentence," I said quietly. "Proof is all I've ever kept." The tension stretched so tight I thought the walls would split. Daniel stood between us, pale, shaking his head. "Stop. Please, just stop." "Then, tell the truth," I said. But he said nothing. Days dragged. Collectors still called, though Emily intercepted most. Sarah, the neighbor, caught me one afternoon at the mailbox. "Mr. Harris, is everything all right? I've seen police cars out front." "Just a misunderstanding," I said. She hesitated. "I don't mean to intrude, but I've noticed Melissa taking your mail before. Thought maybe it was odd." Her words cut deep. Another nail in the coffin of trust. Inside, Emily whispered, "That's a witness, Bow. If this goes to court, her testimony matters." By Thursday, Mason called again. "We flagged transactions tied to a laptop inside your home. That device ID matches one registered to Daniel Harris." I closed my eyes. "My son." "I'm sorry," Mason said softly. "We'll prepare the report for the judge." When I told Emily, her jaw clenched. So it wasn't just her. "He's tangled in this too." That night I confronted them both. The bank traced transactions to Daniel's laptop. Daniel's face collapsed. "Bah," Melissa snapped. "Don't say a word." He looked at her, then at me. "I didn't know it would get this far." "You knew enough," I said. "I thought we could pay it back," he cried. "I thought it would vanish before anyone noticed." But it grew. It kept growing. Melissa cut him off. "Stop groveling. They can't pin this on us without proof." Emily slammed her fist on the table. "Proof. We have ATM stills. We have the recording. We have the device ID. How much more do you want?" Daniel covered his face with his hands. His shoulders shook. Melissa glared at me. "If you take this to court, you'll destroy this family." I stood, my voice iron. "No, you already did." The room went still. That night I sat with Emily at the table, my notebook open. She poured tea into Anna's old blue-rimmed cup and slid it to me. "Bah, tomorrow we face them in court. Whatever happens, your name will not go down with theirs." I whispered, "Anna, I kept your promise." Emily touched my hand. "And tomorrow we'll show the world." The house is quieter than I have ever known it, and yet it doesn't feel like peace. Peace is something warm, something you breathe in. This silence is colder, heavier. It creeps under doors and settles on the furniture like dust. I sit at the kitchen table after midnight, receipts spread around me. Grocery slips from last week, tax statements stamped paid, doctor co-pays written in my hand. Proof of 70 years spent steady, proof of a life built without borrowing. Sometimes I smooth the edges of the paper, whisper to Anna's memory, I never let us sink, not once. But the truth is heavier now. I kept us steady, yes, but inside this house under my roof lies, grew like mold. Daniel, my boy, following Melissa into the dark, Melissa smiling as she stole. And me silent too long, convincing myself their chaos couldn't touch me if my own book stayed balanced. I was wrong. Silence didn't protect me. It protected them. I walk to the fridge and stare at the scraps taped there. Property tax due, March 15th. Medicare appointment Tuesday. Little notes that kept me upright that Anna would have smiled at. They look back at me now like witnesses. I brew tea in Anna's cup, the one with the faded blue rim. The kettle hisses, steam fogs my glasses. Sitting down, I cradle the cup in both hands and imagine her across from me again. She would listen, nod, then tell me plain. Bill, silence isn't strength when it protects a lie. Have I been silent too long? For years I let Daniel and Melissa stay, let their packages clutter the hall. their laughter ring hollow after late-night shopping sprees. I told myself it wasn't my concern, that as long as my ledgers balanced their mess couldn't stain me. But lies spread like smoke. They seep through walls. I remember Anna once saying after she caught Daniel sneaking money from her purse, "Children test you. They want to know if your rules are real. If you bend, they'll never believe again." I bent. I looked away. And now the rules lie broken on the floor. In the mornings, I sit by the window with coffee and watch the neighborhood wake. Mrs. Turner watering her flowers, Sarah jogging past. They glance at me polite, but I see the question in their eyes. Is the old man slipping? Did he forget what he signed? The shame burns more than the debt ever could. Emily notices. She sets her hand on mine at the table. "Bah, you're too quiet," she says gently. "Words feel small," I answer. "Silence feels like surrender." Her voice echoes Anna's in my head. Silence isn't strength. Silence is permission. At night I lie awake and hear them down the hall. Melissa's sharp tone, Daniel's low reply, my name in their mouths, twisted bargaining chips for their excuses. I turn over, clutch the wooden box to my chest like a shield. I whisper into the dark, I won't let them rewrite me. Collectors still call, though less now. Emily answers, sometimes crisp and calm, writing each detail in her neat hand. She is my anchor. Without her, maybe I would believe the whispers that I was old, confused, forgetful. But I am not. My memory is sharp. My ledger is clean. I think back to when I was a young man. My father told me once, "Your name is the only inheritance you can guarantee your children. Protect it." I thought he meant reputation in town. Now I see he meant something deeper, the honesty you carry every day. Daniel doesn't see that. To him, inheritance is money, comfort, things he can hold. To Melissa, it's leverage, a tool to bend rules. But Emily, she understands. She always has. One evening, she pulls out an old tax receipt, yellow but legible. "Bah, you kept this from 1989. Every year, I tell her. Every cent. She shakes her head, half laughing, half crying. And they dare say you're confused. We sit in silence a long time. Then she says, "When this is over, you should tell your story. People need to hear it. How families can betray, how careful lives can be stolen." Who would listen, I ask. Her eyes shine. Everyone who's ever been cheated, everyone who's ever been made invisible, they'll care, bah. Her faith steadies me. At night, I walk the neighborhood under street lamps. Houses glow with televisions, safe and warm. I wonder how many doors hide secrets like mine, how many fathers keep silent while their names are used as currency. I pause on the church steps. I don't pray for miracles. I pray for courage. The question circles me always, is silence strength or is it weakness? I used to think strength meant swallowing hardship without complaint, that weakness was shouting when you could endure. But now enduring lies is not strength, naming them is. Emily asks one morning, "Do you regret letting them stay?" Yes, I sigh. And no. A father wants to believe his son will find his footing. I gave him time. Shelter. I thought love was enough. And now I see love without truth rots, I say. And I won't rot with them. Her eyes brim, but she smiles. The days ahead will be hard. The bank will push, Melissa will fight, Daniel will crumble. But I am no longer silent. I open my notebook, pen in hand, and write one line in bold. Silence protects the liar. Truth protects the name. For the first time in weeks, I feel ready to face the storm, ready to reclaim what they tried to steal. The morning the envelope from the police arrived, I already sensed it carried more than paper. Emily slid it open with the small silver knife Anna once used for letters. Inside were still frames pulled from the Atom camera. She laid them on the table. Under the fluorescent light of the mall stood a woman withdrawing bills. The coat, the tilt of her shoulders, the purse hanging at her side, I didn't need clarity to know. Melissa. Emily's breath caught. Bah, it's her. I nodded slowly. She took my name to that machine. She used it like it was hers. Later that afternoon, Mason from the bank called. Mr. Harris Compliance cleared the activation recording. We've sent a copy to law enforcement, but I can tell you it wasn't a male voice. Then, whose, I asked. You'll hear it yourself soon. When I told Emily, her lips tightened, her eyes bright. This is it, Bah. The tide's turning. That night as I passed the hallway, I heard Melissa on her phone. Her whisper was sharp. They're closing in. I told you we should have paid it off earlier. No, don't panic. He won't push too hard. He's old. He hates fighting. I stepped into the doorway, the lamp's glow stretching my shadow. You're wrong, I said. She spun around, eyes wide. How much did you— Enough? I cut in. Enough to know you counted on my silence. That silence is gone. Her mouth opened, then closed. She brushed past me, perfume lingering like smoke. The next morning, Emily drove me to the station. Officer Ramirez greeted us with a folder and a small recorder. You should hear this, he said. He pressed play. A voice filled the room, steady and low. Yes, this is William Harris. I'd like to activate my new card. It was Melissa's voice, pitched lower, deliberate. My name spoken as if it belonged to her. My stomach twisted. Emily's fists clenched. Ramirez stopped the tape. This will stand as evidence. Emily's voice shook with fury. That's fraud. Plain and simple, I whispered. She stole my voice. On the way home, Emily said, Bah, tomorrow we put this in front of the judge. Enough hiding. That evening we sat at the table. Melissa served herself first, pretending calm. Daniel picked at his food, silent. Emily sat straight-backed, folder in front of her like armor. I pulled the photos and the recorder from my jacket and set them down. This, I said, pointing, is you at the ATM. I pressed play. Melissa's voice echoed in the kitchen. Daniel's fork clattered. Melissa's face went white. You thought proof wouldn't come, I said. But lies leave footprints. Daniel stared at her. Mel, please tell me. It's nothing, she snapped. Just a mistake. Emily's voice cut like glass. A mistake doesn't open an account, activate a card, and drain $50,000. Melissa's hands shook. We needed help, and he never uses credit. It was wasted on him. I slammed my palm on the table. My name is not wasted. My life is not a resource for you to mine. You could have asked. Instead, you stole. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. Bah. I no more excuses, I said. You chose her lies over my truth, but the truth has found you now. Silence fell thick as cement. Melissa shoved her chair back. So what now? You'll press charges against family. Emily leaned forward, her voice steady. If family steals, they make themselves strangers. Melissa's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. That night I opened the wooden box in my room. Receipts, tax slips, grocery stubs, proof of a careful life. I slid in the photos and the recorder. Proof of betrayal now lay beside, proof of honesty. I thought of Anna's words. Rules mean nothing if you don't enforce them. I whispered, I'm enforcing them now. Sleep came easier than I expected. In my dream, I stood in a courtroom, my wooden box open like scripture showing the world what was true. Morning light spilled through the blinds. Emily poured coffee and set it in front of me. Bah, are you ready? For 70 years I said I balanced my books. Now I'll balance this one. Daniel entered pale and drawn. Bah, please, don't take this to court. We can settle it quietly. Quiet, I said, is what nearly buried me. Quiet is over. Melissa followed her smile, gone. If you do this, you'll destroy us. I met her gaze. You destroyed yourselves the day you forged my name. Emily closed the folder with a snap. Tomorrow we walk into that courtroom, and tomorrow the truth walks in with us. I shut the latches on my box, the sound sharp in the morning air. Then tomorrow we end the silence. The courthouse was fuller than I had imagined. Not just lawyers and clerks, but neighbors, reporters, even Mrs. Turner from across the street. Whispers rolled through the benches as Emily guided me to our table, the wooden box heavy in my arms. Across the aisle, Melissa sat stiff, Daniel beside her with hollow eyes. The judge entered. Court is in session. The bank's lawyer spoke first, precise as a blade. Your Honor, William Harris is responsible for $50,000 in unpaid charges. I rose slowly, knees aching, voice steady. I never opened that card. My name was stolen, the lawyer smirked. We have application activation transactions, Your Honor. Officer Ramirez interrupted, placing a recorder on the table. This is the activation call. The judge nodded. Ramirez pressed play. Melissa's voice filled the chamber, pitched lower. Yes, this is William Harris. I'd like to activate my new card. Gasps rippled. All eyes turned toward me, then toward Melissa. Her face drained of color. That is clearly not the defendant's voice, the judge said sharply. The bank's lawyer shuffled papers, flustered. Regardless, the account functioned. Additionally, Ramirez cut in, producing another document. Our team traced online transactions to a laptop registered to Daniel Harris, the defendant's son. The room erupted in murmurs. Daniel's head snapped up, his face pale as ash. "No," he whispered. "It was just bills. I thought it would vanish." Melissa hissed, "Stay quiet." But Daniel broke. His voice cracked across the room. "Bah, I'm sorry. I thought it was harmless. I thought it would disappear before anyone noticed. I never wanted you to carry it." Tears blurred his face, and for the first time the courtroom saw not just fraud, but family fractured. Emily's voice rang out clear and sharp. "Dad, you don't owe them money. They owe you your name back." The silence that followed was electric. Even the judge leaned forward, eyes narrowed. Finally, he struck his gavel. "Given the ATM footage, the activation recording, and the online trace, this liability is suspended. Mr. William Harris is not responsible for this debt. The fraud investigation will continue." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My name, at least, was mine again. Melissa slammed her chair back. "This is a witch hunt," she spat. Cameras clicked as reporters surged forward. Daniel covered his face, sobbing. "I'm sorry, Ba," he whispered, microphones catching every word. The judge banged the gavel again. "Order. This hearing is adjourned pending investigation." We stepped into the hallway. Flashbulbs exploded. Neighbors craned their necks. Mrs. Turner shook her head and whispered to another woman. "So it really was them," reporters swarmed. "Melissa, did you steal your father-in-law's identity, Daniel? How long were you complicit?" Melissa shielded her face, snarling. No comment, but her mask cracked in every flash. Daniel trailed, hunched, his shame written across his shoulders. I paused on the courthouse steps. Sunlight warmed my face. Emily at my side, steady as stone, the wooden box pressed to my chest. Neighbors nodded to me. Some even clapped me on the back. Vindication traveled faster than gossip. Behind me, cameras caught Melissa's fury, Daniel's collapse. Their disgrace was no longer private. It belonged to the world. And yet I knew this wasn't the end. The fraud case would dig deeper. More truths would surface. But my name was mine again. And I ask you, what would you do standing in my shoes? Stay silent to protect family, or fight to reclaim your name? Tell me in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because the next story will show just how far betrayal can spread. Thank you for watching.